The Capital Confidential podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
Risa Sugarman is the pink-haired, gun-toting sheriff of New York's election law. Or she's a rogue actor who needs to be brought in line with reporting requirements and oversight from the bipartisan Board of Elections. Depending on your point of view about Risa, who has been the state's chief enforcement counsel since 2014, you will have a certain opinion about controversial regulations the State Board of Elections commissioners adopted this week. On this episode of Capital Confidential, with the help of Jennifer Wilson, the legislative director for the League of Women Voters in New York, we will explore the history of the Chief Enforcement Counsel, consider the job Risa Sugarman has done for the past 4 years, and review the new regulations she has to work under.
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election?
We will. I'm going to run against him.
I wish you would. I wish you would, Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
I'm David Lombardo, and this episode of Capital Confidential stems from new regulations the State Board of Elections Commissioners, a bipartisan group of 4 men, approved this week. The headlines following the meeting were focused on the changes to the subpoena issuing process for Risa Sugarman, who is in charge of election law enforcement in New York. But there were also new reporting requirements for her office, too. Sugarman's position stems from a 2014 law that was created as a substitute for the Moreland Commission, which rankled the political establishment on both sides of the aisle and was shut down after less than a year. Here is Jennifer Wilson of the League of Women Voters explaining what took place and the office that was created.
The office is supposed to be this quote-unquote independent office that can look into campaign finance cases where there might be a candidate or a campaign who hasn't filed or has filed incorrectly, and that they can go out and either take criminal action and bring them to court or just get them to file and come into compliance with election law. But the way that it's sort of panned out now, the State Board of Elections doesn't feel this is a truly independent office and that it's actually, as they say, interdependent, that the two are supposed to work together and the two are supposed to help each other to find these cases and to pursue these cases. And Risa Sugarman, of course, came out of the governor's office, and I believe we complained at that time, too, that, every single time there's this position having to do with ethics or good government, it's somebody from the governor's office. The whole reason that the Board of Elections was made bipartisan in the first place back in the 70s was because it was a governor appointee who was overseeing a Secretary of State at the time, and the legislature at that time in the 70s felt that it should be bipartisan and we should have both sides. So it's like we flipped back to, oh no, we want to have a quote-unquote independent agent who's an appointee by the governor.
Despite being an appointee of the governor, does she have that reputation as being independent?
I would say so. And the cases she's brought, don't get me wrong, we're pleased with the cases that she has brought. We just wish she would do more cases and have more people come into compliance. But at the end of the day, with all of these agencies, the thing they lack is funding. So there's never enough money to really do the work that we want to see them do.
And the work that good government groups like the League of Women Voters, like NYPIRG, want to see is what? I mean, is it investigating non-compliance? Is it looking at violations that are more egregious? What is it they want to see investigated?
I think it's everything. I think we want to see more investigations. We want to see more non-filers brought into compliance. We want to see more campaign finance issues disclosed to the public. We want to see it all. And I know from the county's perspective, the county commissioners are so frustrated with the work that's been done so far because they're the ones living it. They're the ones in their counties that have constituents. They have other candidates coming to them complaining, saying, hey, this candidate has a commercial that's running every hour on the hour. I know for a fact they have not filed a single dollar. What are you going to do about it? And the enforcement office really isn't doing anything about it.
Does that end up falling to the local media then to have to report it, to expose it, to bring people to actually take the appropriate steps to come into compliance?
In some cases, it has gone to the local media, but even then, these cases aren't having any action taken on them.
This lack of action was a repeated critique of the BOE commissioners at their meeting on Wednesday, especially from board co-chair Doug Kellner. Fun fact about Doug, he was appointed by Sheldon Silver, who would eventually be found guilty twice of corruption charges. Checking my notes, though, I'm reminded that the Republican co-chair was appointed by Dean Skelos, who was also found guilty twice of corruption charges. But I digress. Here is Doug in Wednesday's meeting talking about non-compliance with campaign finance laws.
But there are still 2,074 committees that have failed to file their January 2018 periodic report. The Chief Enforcement Council has not taken formal action against a single one of those 2,074 non-filers. Not one out of 2,074. Essentially, what we have is the Chief Enforcement Council saying, unless you've done something really horrible to get on my radar, but I'm not going to tell you what it is that will get you on my radar, I'm not going after non-filers with the hearing process. What has happened is that the Enforcement Council has effectively announced, I'm not going to do enforcement proceedings any longer. It's as if the mayor had said, I'm telling my police commissioner not to issue parking tickets any longer, because issuing parking tickets is a waste of resources of the police department. And yet, it's issuing parking tickets that is critical to getting parking compliance on a routine basis by the population. So what we have is, because of Enforcement Council's refusal to bring enforcement proceedings against non-filers, we have this huge expansion of people, of committees that are not complying with the finance disclosure laws by not filing.
And while 2,000 and change delinquent filers is a big number, it doesn't include statewide candidates for office, generally, or any serious candidates for state office. Most of these are on the local level, where much less money is involved, or with former candidates who never closed their committees. Here's Jennifer again explaining why it does matter.
Because you could argue that a lot of these, the thousands of cases that haven't been closed out are just those small things. But within those, I'm sure, it's New York State. We're one of the most corrupt states in the country. I'm sure some of those
definitely top 5.
Yeah, are a little bit shadier than just the sheriff or the coroner who lost his race, or the dog catcher in some areas.
So what has Risa Sugarman's office done? What has the Chief Enforcement Council done since being created in 2014?
She's pursued a number of cases, as Commissioner Kellner pointed out, a quote-unquote handful of cases. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I know it's probably less than 30 have actually been brought to court and sorted out. And almost all the cases that she did bring up were these high-profile cases, these cases that were all over the news, all over the media, as recently as the IDC case. They're always big cases. And as far as the smaller cases, these individuals are still non-compliant. They're still out there. They still haven't filed. They still haven't disclosed. They still haven't closed their campaign accounts. And they're just sort of out there in the wind. And we technically could be collecting a lot of money from these people.
What do you mean by that? They should be paying fines for not filing their July periodic report?
Right. They should be paying fines, or at the very least just getting them into compliance. And a big piece of this regulation is having the office disclose what they're doing on those cases, having an organized system of reaching out to those individuals saying, hey, you have to come into compliance. This is your timeline to do it. If you don't do it, you're going to get a fine. We're going to take you to court, et cetera, et cetera. And you mentioned regulations, and what you're referring to is what the State Board of Elections adopted this week, which included a whole bunch of new requirements for the Sugarman's office, including reporting requirements. And the argument is that the reporting requirements should shame Risa Sugarman into action, or what? I think it's a mix of that, to have the public sort of aware of it, but also within the last few months at these meetings themselves, all the different staff are supposed to report on their individual units. So the council and compliance and all these different processes with elections. And at all these meetings, Risa, it's not mandated that she tell the commissioners what she's doing, but it's expected we should share information because our office is working with you to get these people into compliance. She has come and she has said, I have no report for you. You can ask me questions at this time. She supplies no information. She's not disclosing anything. There's no exact numbers. And that's got to be extremely frustrating, not only to the public, but to the commissioners as well.
Well, what's been the reaction from the commissioners? Because if my understanding is correct, you've been at, every meeting since 2015?
Mm-hmm.
So
I missed one because I was sick, but I did watch it.
Oh, boy. Oh, jeez.
they're very
Sorry,
exciting.
listeners. Sorry. But so, what's been the reaction from the commissioners? Are they receptive to this?
They have been just so frustrated, and it's not just one side. I know a lot of people are worried with these regulations that, there's going to be partisanship now, and obviously the Democrats would say, no, we don't want to subpoena Democrat candidates, and Republicans would say, we don't want to subpoena Republican candidates. This is the one issue I feel like the two sides are seeing eye to eye in just the most complete understanding way, that they both are just so frustrated and enraged. And as Commissioner Kellner always says, she's the traffic cop who is picking and choosing who she's giving parking tickets to. And most people, she's not giving a ticket. I'm totally talking out of both sides of my mouth on this issue, but I genuinely go to the meetings, I see both sides. To her point, she has a small office. She has a really small budget. It's hard to be the traffic cop and to do the tickets when, there's so many, but then you have the one guy who's like quadruple parked like across the intersection versus the person who is maybe in a loading zone or something. Like it's a very different way to utilize your time and your energy and the state's money.
So is it as simple as let's give Risa Sugarman's office 10 more investigators, 10 more attorneys?
I think it could be, but I do still see the reporting as being integral within the relationship between the Board of Elections and within that office. And if it wasn't Risa and if it was somebody who they got along with better, I think, it could improve communications and improve all this. But this hostility has just been growing and growing and growing and growing. And at this point, I don't think it's going to get any better. I think it's just going to keep getting worse.
The tension was on display as soon as the new regulations came up for discussion. First was Sugarman, who did not mince words in her 12-minute opening statement. Then co-chair Kellner spoke for nearly 30 minutes, some of which you've already heard. We'll hear some of Sugarman's remarks and then some separate questioning from Kellner, which got heated fast.
These rules demonstrate the lack of expertise and commitment to impartial, nonpartisan investigations. Yet the board has unilaterally decided to circumvent the legislative process by effectively creating new law. The rules would shift the Chief Enforcement Council's statutory investigative authority to the commissioners and return partisan control to the very board from which such authority was removed in 2014. I think the specifics of your regulations in terms of what the deliberative process is,
I'm talking about metrics now.
Yes, and that's included in your metrics, and I have no idea what you're talking about in terms of what Mayor Giuliani then required.
Well, that's my emphasis, is that you have no idea what we're talking about, and you have put your head in the sand to learn about what we're talking about in order to avoid any kind of accountability.
Here is Jennifer with more background on the relationship between Sugarman and the Board of Elections.
Yeah, and even the staff in the state Board of Elections that sort of refer a lot of these cases and sort of start the non-filer filing of the non-filers, if you will, and try and get people to compliance before they get to her office. And they're frustrated too. And at this meeting didn't necessarily show that, but you could see at previous meetings where they were just kind of like, we went to the office and they didn't want to communicate with us and we're having a hard time and we're not seeing eye to eye on this. And one of the biggest things being actually issuing the letters asking these individuals to come into compliance, that Ms. Sugarman's office wasn't doing it up to the standards of what the Board of Elections used to do before that office was there, or even within earlier of her post being there. But it's funny because the whole reason that the Moreland Commission created her office was because the Board of Elections wasn't pursuing really any cases.
Right.
So you could argue that maybe this is better than before. It's not great, but maybe it's better. Maybe it's good by New York standards.
This sentiment that Sugarman is going where no enforcement officer has gone before was reinforced by a public comment from earlier this year by the transparency group Reinvent Albany. Quote, "The board should not seek to undercut the independence of the Chief Enforcement Counsel, who has investigated types of cases not previously taken on by the Election Law Enforcement Unit of the board," end quote. This charge of cramping Sugarman's independence stems from the regulations that address Sugarman's subpoena powers, which were also a problem for the Moreland Commission, with legislative leaders from both parties objecting to its subpoenas nearly 5 years ago. Under the adopted regulations, Sugarman now has to demonstrate to the board that a subpoena request is reasonable, and the commissioners gain the authority to quash or modify her subpoenas. While the board already had power over the issuance of subpoenas, Sugarman was previously given a wide latitude during her time in office. The commissioners have insisted that the new regulations are based in existing law, provide accountability, and will create a more uniform enforcement process. State Attorney General Barbara Underwood, however, said in a statement that the board's actions gutted the Enforcement Council's authority and would promote even more public corruption in New York. Quote, "Our partnership with a strong, independent enforcement council has allowed us to hold public officials to account for breaking campaign finance laws and cheating New Yorkers. With today's vote, that work is jeopardized by potential political interference in law enforcement investigations," end quote. Here's Jennifer again.
And at the end of the day, even with this regulation that they put in effect on her, she still has the authority to overrule a 2-2 vote. It seems like they want to have more subpoena power than they already have, and technically, according to election law, they already have the subpoena power, but it also says that the Chief Enforcement Council doesn't have to go to them for their subpoena, but should go to them for their subpoena. And to note, within the time that we've had this, the subpoena, since 2014, since we've had this office, the subpoena authority has only been utilized less than 10% of open investigations, and in perhaps as few as 1% of complaints. So it's not like it's getting used a lot. She applied for subpoena authority 7 times in 2017 and hasn't applied a single time in 2018. So I kept reading through this, trying to figure out, okay, I know what they're mad about, what they're really mad about. Does this get at what they're mad about? And the first part, having to do with the subpoena, to me and to the league, doesn't really get at what they're mad about.
From my perspective, the big thing seems to be with the changes has to do with the motions to quash or modify the subpoenas as well. It sounds like the board is giving more leeway to the recipients of the subpoenas to now make a move to the board to basically block a subpoena. Is that a fair reading, you think, of what the regulations do?
Yeah, and again, as I was reading that, I was trying to see from the commissioner's point of view, why would they do that? What's the point of that? And I kind of feel like the point of that is the hope that she would bring more cases that could quickly be taken care of, to not have this insane number of 1,000, 1,000 open cases, to have that number be cut down in half at least. But I don't know if that would really get to the root of the issue.
Based on Kellner's remarks in the meeting, though, the subpoena powers for the board are largely a check on Sugarman's office and seem to stem from complaints that have come from people who have been on the receiving end of these subpoenas.
And with respect to the addition of a procedure for quashing the subpoenas, this has been called for by numerous of the members of the election law bar who have been objecting to the abusive use of the subpoena authority given by the commissioners to enforcement counsel. And I wish I could go in to some of those abuses that have occurred on the part of enforcement counsel, but we are bound by the confidentiality requirements, so I cannot disclose the abuses committed by enforcement counsel that should be appropriately reviewed by the commissioners. And this idea of hiding behind confidentiality is complete anathema to election administration enforcement, where we should all see what's going on and we can see that it's above board and on a bipartisan or nonpartisan basis. And all I can say is that the abuses that I've seen tell me that this process is not working, it's completely broken, and the legislature needs to address the process.
Regardless of where you stand on the regulations, any shrewd political observer would recognize that the timing of the board's actions was problematic. This puts incumbents in a tough position because they might quietly like the idea of an enforcement office that's more akin to life before Risa Sugarman. That could explain why major political figures on both sides of the aisle were quiet on the issue for months, despite my colleague Chris Bragg's attempt to elicit comments from legislative leaders John Flanagan and Carl Heastie, Republican gubernatorial nominee Mark Molinaro, and incumbent Andrew Cuomo. On Wednesday, hours before the meeting, though, Cuomo's office broke their silence and urged the board to put off the vote and go back to the drawing board. This position was made clear to the two Democratic commissioners, and the governor's budget director, Robert Mujica, called up Senate Republicans, who, if you'll remember, appointed the Republican chair, to question the timing of the vote. Timing was cited as the problem by Andrew Spano, a Democratic commissioner and ally of the governor. Quote, "I just think it's a mistake," he said during the meeting. Quote, "We're in the middle of funny season." He also raised concerns about what the headlines in the paper would say the next day. Our headline was, "BOE approves regulations that could hinder independent investigations." Subheadline, "Cuomo weighs in, gives thumbs down to controversial rules." Speaking after the meeting, Spano said the governor didn't influence his decision and his mind was made up after the last meeting. Here is Jennifer Wilson one last time to take us home.
One thing about this reg that I started thinking about, and I started kind of thinking negatively, like, what is the alternative motive? They list out here that there's sort of 13 things that she's essentially, like, supposed to be doing, or the office is supposed to be doing. And part of me was wondering, well, did we put this reg into effect because we want to show that she's not doing these things that, according to the law, she's supposed to be doing? Mm-hmm. Because I couldn't think of any other reason why they would make this big deal out of the subpoena power. Like, I couldn't think of how it would get at the issue of not cooperating, not being collaborative, not disclosing information. What's the point of it, is what I kept going back to, and I still am not totally sure.
Do you expect things to be smooth sailing from now on?
No, and I don't even know if she would bring numbers, or if she would actually do what's being asked, or if she would just wait and do it for the annual report, or what's going to happen. But it'll be interesting regardless, the September 11th, which is when the primary is supposed to be, but it's not. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't go at all, and she's just like, you know what, I'm over it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, because there's pretty much a wide spectrum of where this might go from now. The one side is, it's the end of the world as we know it. And then the other side is, this will just make the office better, and we'll have more accountable procedures, and we'll hopefully get more traffic tickets issued. But I guess we'll have to wait and see at this point. That's all we can leave it at for now.
Which is funny, because that's what everybody said in 2014 when this office was created and it was appointee directly out of the governor's office. It was like, okay, well, let's wait and see what happens. Here we are,
yes.
2018.
And that's our show. My thanks to Jennifer Wilson of the League of Women Voters for New York State for joining us. With election season coming up, make sure you check out the League's voter guide so you can make an informed decision. And thanks to Chris Bragg, who has aggressively covered this issue for months for the Times-Union and talked me through everything I witnessed after Wednesday's meeting. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. You can do so without approval from the BOE commissioners. Until next time, podcast adjourned.
Just heard I tried to get you.
This day sucks.